Do you wonder about past lives? Have you ever thought about where your soul has been, where it's going, or what lessons and memories have been gathered along the way? In this podcast, we will discuss past life memories, psychic phenomena, energy healing, and other metaphysical topics with experts and the average person to find out how we can heal through these experiences. So I invite you to join me on my journey. Welcome to the Regression Session. Now I don't have to be a podcaster anymore. Now I can just be...
Go back to being a dad now.
myself. Yeah, a dad and a dude and sometimes a dud. Welcome back to the Regression Session. My name is Ian. Welcome to the Regression Session. For any new listeners, thanks for tuning in. We love you. Couple of things before we get started in this week's episode. We've reached the top 10% of podcasts as a community, but only 30% of you have actually clicked follow in your podcast players, so dang it, click follow. And then, secondly, I've partnered up with the former president of the American Association for Hypnotherapy, Dr. Bruce Koloski, to assist up-and-coming past life regression hypnotherapists and clinical hypnotherapists with attaining a board certification through the Association of Hypnotherapy via Dr. Koloski. If you want to take advantage of that, he is offering a 25% discount through my show if you reach out to him. Go ahead and check out the link in the description where you can contact him and just let him know that you heard about it on my show. This week, we're going to be hearing from Patty K. Hall. Patty is a practitioner of deep memory process, and I had no idea what that was before I had a conversation with Patty. It's almost like a past life regression, but it utilizes your entire body, your energetic body, your spiritual body, your mental body, and your physical body, and it's a very deep healing process that takes hours and hours and hours and a lot of expertise, which Patty has, and she was very happy to share it with me on my show. So big thanks to Patty for coming on my show and telling me a lot about deep memory process. I'm excited to share this with my audience today, and I hope that you guys get a kick out of learning about deep memory process. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Patty. Hey, Patty, thanks for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having me, Ian.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to having you on, but before we get started, just for my audience sake, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about yourself, just so that we can get to know you, and then we can just jump right into it.
Okay. Well, my name is Patty Hall, and I have a place called Connecticut Center for Past Life Regression. It's in Old Saybrook, Connecticut. And I do past life regression there. I do Reiki, I do shamanic journeying, I do shamanic work. I do classes, workshops, all kinds of things to help people resolve some kind of wound, to bring healing, to bring awareness, to bring education is a really big thing for me. Even when I'm working with regression, it's always about education. And it wasn't what I was planning on saying, but it came out. That is the bottom line to my work, is educating people, healing, doing healing in a way that they learn something about themselves. It's we had talked earlier, one of our conversations about the spiritual journey that people take, or that they're on, or that they're suddenly on, or they've been on for 50 years, or they've been on for 50 hours. All of those have the same intention, and that's to learn. They want to learn about mostly their soul's journey. What am I here for? What have I been here for? What are my what has the soul been doing in past lives? What's it doing in this lifetime? They want to get on with it, bottom line. And they don't know what the it is. And so that is part of the work that I do when I'm working with people, is helping them find out what that it is that has been stopping them from moving forward, finding out what the it is that they're wanting to do in this lifetime. And by that, I don't mean career. I mean, just as a soul, as soul growth. I started off my whole life just remembering past lives, didn't have a context to put it in. I dreamed a lot of past life experiences. I would have them in waking moments. Again, didn't have a context for it. And in the late, late 80s, I started just to have these spontaneous experiences of meeting people, and I would, shake their hand or give them a hug, would even be stronger, but I would start getting flashes, and I'd start getting, whole scenes. I always get things like a whole movie plays in front of me. I hear a sound, I see pictures. It just flashes like a movie. And it was happening more and more and more. And then in the late 90s, I was at an astrology workshop and met Patricia Walsh there, who was Roger Woolger's, who developed deep memory process. He wrote the book Other Lives, Other Selves. He is a Jungian analyst. He was a preeminent therapist who really developed past life regression as a therapy. His interest wasn't whether or not past lives are real, whether or not reincarnation was real, but rather to create a therapy that works. He said he would get tired of, talking about the same thing with clients. And he felt like after decades of seeing some of them that they weren't really getting anywhere. They were just talking about the issue, but not moving through an issue. And so he set on this journey to develop what is now called deep memory process as a way to just plow through the nature of the wound and release it once and for all. And he was able to do that. So what sometimes I've had people come in and say they've been in decades of therapy, and in, one afternoon, we got farther than they were able to get in decades. And so he was successful in developing deep memory process. And it's not just a past life regression. That is the beginning of his process. In deep memory process, the story that comes through in the regression is just the means. He used to say, it's just the means to the death. And it's that after the death that the real healing takes place. And after that point, it becomes very shamanic. And he used to say that all the time. And in my mind, I'm saying, well, what does that mean? Because I didn't know. And so that led me into studying shamanism. And I did private study for a few years. And that made everything make sense. And you know how one thing in spirituality leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. So that was a huge breakthrough for me. And then, I think around 2009 or about 2000, about the same time, actually, I found Clay Loma Caillou out in, Arizona, out in Cottonwood. But it wasn't about 10 years later that I actually went out to, work with him. And then I went out again with him and subsequently edited 3 books with him. And I've just always been very fortunate to have what I felt like the best in the field drop in my path to help me learn what I needed to learn. And so working with Clay really changed my work in a very different way. And so, the class I met Patricia Walsh was an astrology class. I've studied astrology for about 50 years. So blending all of these things together to create a whole, which is what the healer does, is, they're bringing their best tools together to create a whole healing. So using all those things, I've been able to quickly, with astrology, be able to figure out in minutes, here's what the issue is. Where I tell people, they'll say, well, I can tell you what the issue is. I said, I don't want you to tell me what the issue is, because if you knew, you wouldn't be here. First of all, I just want to look at the piece of paper, and it'll tell me in a minute. We can bypass all that and we can get right to the work. And it works. So we can quickly get to the point. In the regression, we're going to lifetimes, which always end up emerging in the astrology chart. We always see the nature of the wound there, but then breaking through. I don't have to tell somebody, go to a lifetime when blah, blah, blah. The soul is going to serve up whatever it needs to heal. And so there's this trust factor in the process of just letting emerge what wants to emerge. And I realize I'm kind of getting off of, you asked me who I am, but this is who I am.
No, you're totally fine. You brought up a few things that I'd like to touch on. The first thing is you mentioned that the practitioner is going to take all of their modalities, all of their different techniques and blah, 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 and put them all together to get a result. Well, I actually have a quote from someone that came on my show a little while ago that I think you might like. His name's John Povey, and he said, all energies are like musical notes. All healers are the players of those notes. When the healer places the notes in the correct order, a symphony will be produced. And so I wanted to say, I appreciate you saying that, because it really lines up with what I've been talking about with people. And then the second thing that you were talking about that I really liked and has been a vein for me lately, I've been really, every single person lately that I've talked to has kind of brought this up. And I think there's a reason for that. I really don't believe in coincidences anymore. But is the therapy thing. So when we're talking about how people will go into therapy for months and months and years and even up to decades and still be trying to work through the same trauma. And when we were first talking, before we started recording, you said people don't know what their wound is, but they just know the symptom. And from my experience, what people will do in therapy is they'll spend time working through the symptoms, but they'll never push past that and get to the actual wound. And that is a big thing that I've been talking about with a lot of people lately. In fact, I even had a therapist come onto my show and talk about this. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think that therapy has its place. I believe that it's a great starting place. But I don't necessarily think anymore that it's that effective, and that might be controversial for some people to hear, but I don't really think that therapy is really all that effective for the vast majority of people. And that might be something that I get in trouble for saying, but we'll see.
Well, I think that's something that we share, as far as past lives go. It's in both of our charts that, these wounds of, damned if you do, damned if you don't. I get in trouble if I say it. I get in trouble if I don't say it. It just kind of, there's no middle ground on it. But there's an article, and I didn't read the whole thing. I have a tendency to just read like the top paragraph, whatever, and then skim the rest. But there's an article that I saw like on a feed, like on on the computer, like, you get like little sidebar things, read this thing. Just that point you just made, which is the article is about the growing awareness that traditional therapy doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't work, but isn't doing what their intention is as far as, really breaking through some stuff. And one of the things that I do that, people, when they hear this, I can hear the on the other end of the phone, but when they come experience it, they're happy. And I explain it this way: is my sessions are 5 or 6 hours. And, people say, well, I've only got like a couple hours. And they go, well, then you can't come. I don't say it that way, but,
well, then I don't want you.
I don't say it that way, but I explain it this way: is I very, very early in my learning how to do deep memory process, I had a mentor, and she had been studying this for 10 years already when I started. And I asked her, like I always ask any teacher, what's the secret? Not that there's some magical secret, but people develop their own secrets that work for them. And not that they're keeping them from other people, but if somebody doesn't ask, they're not just going to explain it. But, and she said, I let people open up in their time, not my time. And I said, well, what do you mean? She says, I'll just let them, lay on, well, we work on the floor, a mat on the floor, so people don't fall off a table, really. She said, I just let them lay there as long as they want. She said, because if I let them lay there long enough, they'll finally open up. And that was so profound for me to hear, because I had worked with her and she was able to get me to places that I said, well, she was just the best, but I didn't know she was just letting me open in my time. And this is a big thing when I'm talking to people on the phone. That's a big aha moment for them, is that awareness that that's why it's so long. Because I said, first of all, you don't know me from Adam, and you're calling me up and saying, I want to do this work. And what you're really asking me is, I want you to heal my soul wound. And I said, there's got to be fear there. I was like, I'm not going to just walk into some place where I've never met somebody before and say, here's my soul. I'm going to bear it and I want you to heal it. It's just, there's too much fear involved in that. And so I always talk to somebody on the phone, a lot of times half an hour to an hour ahead of time. Just for me, I want to get a feel for what's going on. I get a lot off of voice vibration. I want them to feel comfortable with me before they even walk through my door. And one of the things we talked about, again, on the reason why it's a long day, is because for me, I just personally, this is born out of, my own personal experiences. If you have a therapist appointment, it's an hour, maybe 50 minutes, maybe 45. It would take me an hour to tell them what my story is. No therapy on their part, no feedback, just my story. And I'm not going to tell them because I'm not going to be able to get any help with it. And I've had people say this to me, that they say, boy, that's right, because I'll tell my story and then I've got to hold it for another whole week before I go back again. And then I'm telling, we're always constantly adjusting to what feels like residual mini trauma from having to reopen a wound that they can't close in that hour. And so they don't open. They learn, just feed out little stuff. And so by offering that 5 or 6 hour span, and I tell them, I don't finish until we're finished. That could be it. I say, don't make an appointment on a day when you have nothing else to do, because that subconscious part of that, I've got to be here by 7. I got to be here by 6. I got to go to the store and pick up that. I got people coming over for dinner. I've learned this from the hard way. It always becomes the number one thing in their mind while we're working. And it's undoing what we're trying to do, and they can never settle down. So I said, look, just take the day for yourself. And so when they've taken that off the plate and they realize they have the whole day, and I'm not going to push them to open up at any certain time or any amount, they're just going to just open like a flower in their time at their comfort rate. And when it's time for me to push, then I push, because that is what my job is to get right in there and get out what needs to come out. But at the same time, they have to trust me to do it. And I learned that as a student doing this, is there were certain times when I was really confident the person who was working with me, I worked with them before, and I know, okay, if I'm going to go deep, they're going to get the job done. And the other times when I've had somebody who's a new student and they're just learning how to do it, I think, well, I'm not going to open up for this because they don't even know how to close it. And so, and that comes with experience. Being regressed is I've got that much control to do that. And so I've just learned, if I just give them, I've had somebody there one time, like 7 hours, and, I only take one client a day because we got far. But like in that last half an hour, all of a sudden something really big opened up. And I was like, whoa, I could have ended it a half an hour ago, but it's like we took this quantum leap into some really deep soul wound because she inched her way closer to feeling comfortable and confident in doing it. And so this is, part of my really learning, yes, the process, but also the value of time in that process and letting that time be allowed for them to go at their pace.
One thing that you said that was really interesting to me was when you were talking about how you kind of let people open up on their own time, because and your sessions are, you said, 4 to 5 hours, up
Five
to
to
7 sometimes.
5 to 6.
Yeah, 5 to 6 hours. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
that's
And a lot of regressionists that I've talked to and that I've seen recordings of and experienced them doing the work, they'll poke and prod and push and scooch and whatever. Whatever you want to, however you want to say it, they'll be trying to drag it out of you, for lack of a better way to say that. And I've seen this I moderate a forum online on Reddit called Past Lives, and people will get on there and they'll be like, "Hey, I did a past life regression and it didn't even work. I didn't even feel like I was able to go into hypnosis because the guy just or the lady just kept on. Are you what are you seeing? Blah 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 blah." And they'll just keep pushing and pushing. So it's really interesting. Are they in hypnosis the entire time that you're doing that?
Now, I don't actually, hypnosis is a phrase other people use because they don't know what it is I'm doing. And I've kind of quit correcting people because when people think about past life regression, they just think about hypnosis because it's just part of the mainstream, we'll say. Deep memory process is not hypnosis because you don't have to be in hypnosis to access a past life story. And so it's actually more effective to not be in hypnosis. So I am a certified hypnotherapist because when I was taking deep memory process training with Roger Wilbur, he used to always have to answer this question when students would come in: is this hypnosis? Why isn't it hypnosis? And it's just like constant, like every time. I studied with him for 8 years, so I heard a lot of new students coming in. I assisted in some trainings. I've been around it for a long time while he was alive. Unfortunately, he's passed away, but and he would have to answer the question, why is this not hypnosis? And so I took hypnotherapy to find out firsthand why it wasn't hypnosis so I could answer the question. I'll give you an example. If you're sitting watching a movie and all of a sudden you feel like, oh my God, this is so familiar. I know this place. I know this life. I feel like this is like one of my own lifetimes, especially war movies. People get triggered all the time. You're on the brink of being in a past life regression. You have an overwhelming emotion of any kind. You're on the brink of being in a past life regression. You can be very, very alert and awake. My first experience was an eyes wide open experience where I saw everything in front of me happening. So I don't work with people with their eyes wide open because it helps them go in, but you can absolutely access a past life from, just a physical pain. You can access it from an emotional pain. You can access it from a thought by focusing on a thought. What happens in hypnosis is you putting somebody into we'll say a guided meditation or something like that, where they're going deeper, 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 and they're actually getting kind of farther away from the potential for healing. It pushes it deeper into the subconscious. They're going deeper, deeper, deeper. Or deep memory process, it's about getting it to the surface and getting it out, really accessing, getting the physical body in action. I'll give you an example. If I'm in a story or let's say, for instance, I'm not in a story, but I have a client in a story and they're really mad. And I may say to them, well, what I'm seeing in their hand, something going on. And I'm saying like, do you have something in your hand? They'll say, I have a knife in my hand. Well, I have a whole set of props, all stage props. I'll put a knife in their hand. And it's a stage prop, it's a foam knife. But putting it in the hand awakens cellular memory. And that starts feeding the story. And then that anger and the rage starts coming up, because that having the knife in the hand all of a sudden makes it real. And all of a sudden they're feeling like they're in this real live action thing. And I've got like a massive pillow that I put up, and they start stabbing at it. It's like, they're in it. They're in the story. So this idea of, getting the physical body engaged, getting the emotions engaged, they're screaming, yelling, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. And this is all pent up, history, we'll say, pent up history that they didn't even know. Sometimes when they're finished, they go, wow, I never knew I had that in me. and so it's a very different type of getting into a story. Now, not everybody goes there, because not every story is about that. Sometimes the stories are about emotional wounds, where they're just laying there crying the whole time. You find out what's the emotion source. What is the source of the tears? Were you left, on the edge of the ocean, watching your husband's ship leave, never to be seen again? Well, that's a big wound. Where they never saw somebody again. The love of their life left, and they've got 5 kids, and he never comes home. They get no closure. All these types of wounds have emotional, and sometimes physical elements to them. And it's going into all those 4 bodies, the physical, mental, spiritual, emotional bodies. There's a wound on, for the most part, almost every layer. And you have to go in to each one of those layers and tick that box. What is the physical? When you get stabbed, you've got a physical wound. I have people come in all the time with, ask them, where's the pain? And then maybe they'll point to their chest, or they'll point to their abdomen, and I'll say, what does it feel like? And they'll say, well, it's as if I've been stabbed. Well, that's the story. That is the story. The story's in the language. My mother used to say all the time, and this isn't something I caught on to until I, got training, where we were taught to listen to language. My mother used to say, she was always using the phrase about hanging. She would say, hang in there, or he kept me hanging. There's all this hanging stuff. And I realized, as a student, it's like, oh my God, that's her story. It's his hanging story. They left me holding the bag. I remember one time, I used to say that a while, and then actually went into a past life story where I was, part of a, Wild West bank robber gang. I was the shill, but at the end of the robbery, there was a big shootout, and they handed the bag of money to me. And then guess who got caught? It was me. So this idea of left holding the bag. So the language, listening to language, there's so many things right in the surface that are running as part of people's lives, of everyday life. Going into, this is what Roger Wilbur was so brilliant about really exploring, was that you don't have to go in hypnosis to get this stuff. It's right in the surface. Knowing what you're looking for and bringing it up rather than down is a very different way of getting it. And just, and then getting it out, letting them express it. Once it's expressed, it's over, and energetically, over. Going in, looking for soul retrieval is part of deep memory process. Finding out who hasn't passed over, where do they go? And most of the time they don't cross over. They linger at the family farm. They linger about by a stream. They're in a tree. They're in a field of flowers. That's kind of like the 4 main places, that a soul fragment will hang out. Finding that, helping that cross over makes a massive difference in the lives of the living. So there's a lot of energy shifting that happens in deep memory process that doesn't happen, or doesn't happen the same way on any level in hypnosis. So, I always do make the correction with people when they start saying, hypnosis or hypnotherapy. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm certified in it, but that's not what I use in doing regressions. For some people, for a lot of people, I'll do a guided journey to get started, only because it's what they know, it's what they're comfortable with. And because I've noticed over the last couple of years, as you were saying earlier, Ian, about COVID opening up. It might have been in a different conversation we had, but COVID opening this up for a lot of people. There are a lot of people who've never done anything before, where deep memory processes is a pretty heavy experience too. It isn't a place to start. Having awareness about uh, just some kind of energy shifting is helpful. And so over the last couple of years, I've kind of had to figure out, okay, how do I access this same type of experience for somebody who's never done anything before? Because it is deep work. It's not lightweight stuff. And so I started doing guided journeys for the people who've never done anything before, because it's easier. It's just, okay, let's wade into this a little bit easier. And then as they're comfortable with that, then we can kind of launch off into the other. But I just kind of use it as the wade in thing. But really, I don't want them disengaged at all. I want them fully engaged, live action. They hear the traffic, they know they're there. But at the same time, because the consciousness can split at the same time, they're in their story. And so they can be conscious of what we're doing, and they can be conscious. I explain to them like they're in a play, right? You can be Mary Poppins on the stage, but you never forget you're Betty Smith, whoever you are, but, get the point. And so it's the same thing. You can play act as much as you want to really give life to this past life that you have, to really put it into full action. Just allow it to emerge. And in doing that, they find a depth that they didn't know they had. They bring back parts of themselves that has been lost. For people who've lost their power, going back to a powerful lifetime and feeling what it felt like to be in the Colosseum and being a gladiator, for women to experience that is hugely empowering. Going back to, for women, especially women lifetimes, are often disempowering. It's just kind of the nature of a lot of the lifetimes for women. But going to a male lifetime where they've had power changes them. It's just like, no, I'm not taking crap anymore. Kind of a person, and it stays with them. So when we bring back, especially in a soul retrieval, when we bring back a fragment, the good qualities of the soul comes back as well. Maybe it's the creative one that was lost. Maybe it's the strong one. Maybe it was the emotional one. Maybe it's the playful one. But all these traits and qualities of the character who is in the story comes back with a soul retrieval. So that, for me, soul retrieval is a big thing for me. And it's something I look for and go after in any session with somebody, because I know the value of it. It makes a huge energy shift. And it makes an energy shift for people who are in the story that you don't even know. So, anyway, I'm not sure if I answered.
No, you did. That was fabulous. So what I like to do is I like to kind of package things up for my audience to make it very digestible. So just to take a minute to speak to the audience here. Essentially what you're saying is everybody uses different techniques to try to facilitate healing. We live in this life physically, and for I would say like the majority of human existence, that's been the main focus, because we've had to struggle to survive. So, most people have focused on the physicality side of life. Recently, we've been delving into the mental side of things, and that's where we get the conversation with therapy and things like that. And we've dabbled in the spiritual side. But really, we exist physically, mentally, spiritually, and energetically or emotionally. I use those two as kind of synonyms: emotional, energetic.
I think they're different. Just, if you want to say 5.
Well, we could say 5.
Yeah.
We exist in multiple layers.
Yeah.
Now, this soul or deep memory processing, it's going to facilitate healing on all 4 or 5 of those levels, whereas hypnosis is going to just kind of get you in the door. It's like what actually got me interested in like metaphysical stuff was like seeing ghost videos online. That was really my first like exposure to metaphysical, and then slowly moved into all this stuff. So I totally can see where you're saying where like the body needs to act out how it was hurt. You need to feel the anger, you need to feel, how did your soul feel after you had died, or whatever happens, right? Whatever comes across, you need to experience all those things. And so this deep memory processing thing, essentially, for anybody that might be confused, is like, instead of just accessing your core or your soul memory through hypnosis, instead of just going to a doctor and getting patched up, instead of going to just therapy and talking about your feelings, it's doing all of those things together in one shot, basically. So you're hitting each layer of existence with this. And now I can, that makes a lot more sense as to why it would be 5, 6, 7 hours, because that's a lot of layers. One tangent that I wanted to ask you, just a quick question, is those, you mentioned like soul pieces being in by a stream or in a tree or in a field of flowers or whatever. Would you consider those to be ghosts, for
Well, they
lack of a
are.
better term?
Well, right.
Oh,
That's what a ghost is. It's a soul fragment.
okay, thank you. So
Something
one
that has
thing,
passed over. Right.
yeah. So interesting thing on that, by the way. I agree with you. That's what I've always said. Um,
Yeah.
I I do this thing sometimes that happens when I do spiritual hypnosis, which is what I call it. It's called soul rescue, where I'll kind of channel a soul fragment that's not mine, and you can tell if it's not yours, because all you got to do is ask, like, are you me or are you someone else? And it'll tell you. Anybody who's listening, if you've listened to episode 51 of my show, where I was working with a soul fragment named Bart, it's an actual hypnosis recording. The place that he was sitting was a field of flowers, which is kind of very, very interesting that you said that, because I didn't know that was a thing, but I have evidence that has happened to me that kind of backs up and corroborates what you're saying. So that's very interesting. So that was just kind of a weird tangent to go off on, but I wanted to point that out. I feel like for whatever reason, someone needed to hear that. So,
Yeah.
anyway, very interesting.
I just want to add to that is there actually is another place that just popped into my mind, and that's up in a tree. Up in a tree. And the up in a tree comes a lot of times for somebody if when they died, they were in a situation, especially like in wartime, and they're running through the woods, right? They're just, and they take a bullet, and all of a sudden the fragment the fragment thinks it's still alive, right? And they're still fighting the fight. These battlefield ghosts, they just don't know the war's over. And up in a tree is a safe place because they'll just let all the action going on down below while they're safe up in a tree. So just like I said, there's another thing there. But working, I'm not sure how you work, but just from what you said, having a dialogue with the spirit, I do teach a class with, working with those who are related to us, which are the ancestors, and those who aren't related to us, which I call the others, of working with those energies to help them cross over. Because there is a particular way to do it that's safe and loving. And a lot of times you're going into a past life with them, and so it's just another way to work. And so sometimes when somebody comes as they're coming for a regression, but we find out the real issue is actually maybe ancestral, or it has to do with the others. And so, again, if that's what comes, that's what comes. So just being, fluid and letting whatever has to emerge, because how I describe working is we're just working with the energy that presents itself. We come in with an intention of, okay, this is the issue. Because usually people have an idea why they're coming. Now, it's the first thing I ask them on the phone. What's the reason? What brings you to inquire? People generally have a specific reason for calling. They're feeling stuck. Um, is a big one, and COVID triggered that. That's been it. Didn't used to be the number one reason people call, but since COVID really triggered this for people. This idea of being stuck is it because they are we were in lockdown for X amount of months or whatever, and it triggered a lot of people who aren't used to that lifestyle of like, and they didn't know what got triggered. And after I'm stuck came, I'm no longer stuck, but I can't move forward. That was the next theme. And then after that, it was, I'm no longer stuck and I can move forward, but I don't know where to go. And so there's these kind of layers of, change and, layers of triggers that kind of emerged. And, I'm still getting the same story when people call it, it's stuck. I don't know where to go. It's, I can't move forward. But the other thing that really came from COVID, and this is, I think, the silver lining, is people not wanting to waste time anymore. I'm just going to get on this journey. I'm going to get going. I'm going to go as fast as I can because, we don't know how much time there is. And they realize that if I'm going to get started, I'm just going to get started. I'm going to give it all I can. And so that was like another thing. There's a huge push right now, as you were alluding to earlier, about, therapy and people aren't wanting to do, not everybody for sure. I don't mean that at all, but there's some people that just want to increase that time frame. It's like, I don't want this to go on for decades. I want it now. We're a want it now society. When you find out you can come in a day and break through something quickly, why spread that out? And that's not everybody's thinking, but it is for some people. It's like, no, I like to process things fast. I like to move through things fast. I don't want to spend all kinds of time on this when I could be doing something else. I want to work through it quickly if there's a way to do it. And so, my fear factor in that is like almost zero because I want it that bad. I don't care what it's going to take, I'm not worried about I'm going to cry.
Right. Well, one problem that I think people run into with this too, like people who are on the outside, and I had this when I was talking to Joshua Terhune on my podcast a few episodes ago. He's a licensed therapist. We had this discussion about how people when we talk about these different modalities and we talk about these different techniques, like you, Patty, I would look at you and I would say you're really far down the rabbit hole, right? Like you're in deep. You're in really, really deep, right?
Yeah.
But there's people that are definitely out. And for those people, when they look at us and they're talking to somebody who, let's just say, does past life regression and someone's anxiety gets deleted immediately, like after like a 40-minute session, permanent anxiety gone, right? They'll look at you and they'll say, that is too good to be true. You're lying. You're trying to get money from me. That's not real. You guys are overhyping this. But the reality is that it actually is that effective, and you can get rid of your anxiety. All you have to do is allow it to work. You can get rid of all this stuff. You can get rid of your depression and all those things. And that's in no way for anybody listening me saying that, like, let's just say depression medication, if you need it, get it, right? If that's the step for you need, definitely get that. But like, you can get rid of all these things with these modalities. It's not too good to be true. It actually is that effective. So at what point, Patty, would you say that deep memory processing is like the go-to? So is it like, obviously I know anybody could probably come to you and you'd be like, yeah, for sure, let's do it, right? But is there a point where like you think that maybe you should try like past life regression first, or maybe you should do like a chakra balancing or an astrology reading or whatever? Like, is there some point where you're like, you know what, this is a good point to insert deep memory processing into your healing journey? Does that make sense?
It does. I'm just going to make a couple little, it's deep memory process. Just if people are looking for it, it's deep memory process, not processing. I just didn't bother correcting because I figured it was a one-shot deal, but it's just deep memory process, number one. But when I'm working with somebody, my very first thing I do, part of this 5 or 6 hours thing, is I always do the astrology chart no matter who comes to me. Always. I want to know if they're going to walk through my door. First of all, I don't let everybody walk through my door. I don't take everybody who calls and says, hey, I want to come. What I want to know on the phone first is my work what you're looking for? So I don't have people saying, oh, you're charging and trying to get to, I don't have that happen. They're not calling me. I'm in a very specific niche. Mine isn't usually the place to start, as I said. If somebody calls and says, I'm just curious, I just say, I'm not what you're looking for. It's not my job. And I've said this to you. It's not my job to prove to you this is real. It's not my job to convince you it's real. I'm not going to spend my time during our session doing that. That's your job to do before you come. When you've done your homework and you're ready to come, that's when you come. So my stuff isn't a beginning thing. If they want to come for Reiki session, I'll do that because that's just another offering that I have. I do just astrology. I'll just do that. I do shamanic journeying workshops. That's a really great place to begin for people who've never done anything. And what it does is it helps them, especially people with a lot of fear. It's a really provocative is the word that comes. It's not scary. It's gentle, and they can just kind of wade themselves into the whole idea that there's some other way to access some other thing, that some other point of awareness. And so sometimes I'd recommend that first as a step. It's like, I feel like they're not, because they'll often ask, do you think I'm ready for that? And sometimes I'll say, I don't feel like you're ready for that, because if you're going to fight the process, then, why? I'm really conscientious about people wasting money. Like, if you're not ready to do it, then don't do it. I want people coming when they're ready to really work and go for it. I'm really direct when I speak with people. I start with the astrology chart first so we can get I would say it's a foundation for any work we ever do. There's a foundation. I'm looking at the chart. I want to see what the soul wounds have been in the past. I want to see what the soul's doing in this lifetime, and I can see that in the chart. So we know what these wounds are. And then that gives us a context when we're working. What kind of stories might we experience coming up? Do you have a tendency for your soul having lifetimes of being stuck versus lifetimes of crisis? Because there's always this polarity, like two sides of the same coin, that stuckness versus crisis. Or are you in a situation where it's about the independent one versus in relationships? And so I want to find out what that is. And every single time I do this with people, they say, this has just been the best thing. They start getting their feet on the ground. And my number one goal in working with people is always to empower them. It's not about, I am not interested in, I'll just forget. It's taking too long to figure out what else comes after that. But my interest is empowering them, is bottom line. I know what I was going to say. So I'm most interested in me taking their power. I'll give an example. When people ask me questions, well, what do you think about this? It's not about what I think about it. It's about, what do you think about it? I'm not going to tell you what your truth is. I want you to find out what your truth is. This is why we're doing the work, so we can take them to an experience that they're having, that they can validate on their own what their truth is. I just help them bring it out. That's really all I'm doing. Every now and then I'll get somebody, very rarely, but they'll say, do you do past life readings? And I say, well, what do you mean by that? Because in my mind, past life reading is me telling you what your past lives are. To me,
that's what it is.
that's what I think it is, right? I mean, that's the definition. And I said, to me, I wouldn't believe that coming out of anybody's mouth. That has no value to me. I want to experience on my own past life. And when I do, I know it's true for me. Now, this brings up the question, do you believe in past lives? Which inevitably, this is part of the discussion I usually have on the phone with people. They'll say, well, I'm not quite sure. This doesn't happen very often, but I'm not quite sure I believe in past lives. I said, well, it doesn't matter, because I know when I studied with Roger Woger, he would always get asked that by students. They would say, do you believe in past lives? He says, well, Monday, Wednesday, Friday I do, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday I don't, Sunday I don't care. He said, because it's not the reason we do the work. The reason for doing the past life regression isn't it's not that you couldn't do this, but it isn't to prove you were somebody in a past life. That is part of hypnosis. That's part of what they do. The part of the reason we do it as a therapy is therapy. If you're having a remembrance that you were a senator in Roman times, and you were stabbed in the forum, or just whatever, stabbed in the forum, but your dying words are, I lied about it all. It's you're going to feel it's true. You're going to feel it's true. Well, how do you resolve that is the big question, because underlying someplace there is this sense of, I was just thinking about with Julius Caesar, right? The play, where the betrayal,
right.
Where betrayal is the real wound there, right? It's the betrayal. Having dialogue with the person, or the et tu brute, right? Having the dialogue with the person who betrayed you in that afterlife is the biggest healing of all. That's what we're going for. Is like, what happened is, okay, you get stabbed. There's a betrayal. You die, going through the death, calling back in the ones who betrayed you. And maybe you find out even when you call them back that there was somebody else behind it. They were just the fall guy. Sometimes you find out it's your family members. Sometimes you find out it's your friends. And so many times I experience, to a point now where I look for it, and that is, there's a certain signature in a chart where I know that there's usually a lie involved in the story. And I'm always looking for where the lie is. There's always somebody else behind. It's like if you have like a lifetime where you're the prince and you're the heir to the throne, and you get killed by somebody, and you think it's your brother, and then you go back in the story and you still think it's your brother, but then you go after death, and I say, let's go back and look to see, because sometimes I'm feeling something. A lot of times I can see what's going on in their past lifetime, but I'm getting a feeling that, it's just an intuitive feeling that something's amiss here. Something's not adding up. And if something's not adding up, I'm always looking to make sure that it does add up. And so I'm saying, let's go back and see, what's going on with your brother who you think that killed you. And anyway, long story short, sometimes you find out it was the mom behind it that put the hit on the son and let the brother take the fall. So things like that are often in the mix there. And I can see that a lot of times in the chart that there's a betrayal is part of their history, or there's a lie as part of the history, that there's, and if you're part of a lie, you have a hard time getting right with it. Even somebody says, well, it was your brother, but it doesn't feel right. The intuition is kicking in saying, just doesn't feel right, doesn't feel right. So really, this is part of that sleuthing that I've just kind of really gotten, pretty good at, because it's just the way my mind thinks, is trying to ferret out the untruths that people get left with that they can't resolve. And this is a lot of times, I think, why therapies go on for years for people, because they can't get to the real point. And this is where regression helps, is you can get to the real point there. If we can only go as far as our conscious mind can go in talk therapy, right? It's just, you're just drawing from what you know consciously. Well, I really don't know. I'm still mad at them. I know we talked about this, and yeah, that makes sense, but I'm still mad about that. All right. You know what I mean? You can't really get to the underlying cause. A lot of times the things that we're mad about now are things that happened in a past life that we bring forward into this life, because Freud called it repetition compulsion. You keep repeating the same old story with the same old people until we're trying to get it right finally. And the soul wants resolution, and it keeps coming back trying to resolve stuff. And you still only have the same toolbox to work with. It's like you want to build something different, and you still got just the hammer and the nails. And it's like, well, I really need, some new tools here. So that gets in the mix. And that's one of the things that we're deep memory process is, what's in the mix here? There's a lot of things in the mix. There are other people. There are, betrayals. There are all these different wounds, and going out and replaying it and find out what really happened is really a big part of that, regression necessity.
That's very, very interesting. And it's given me a lot to think about personally. I'll be honest with you. I didn't really have any idea what deep memory process was before talking to you. And I'm really glad to have learned about it from you. We've been talking for a while here. Where can people find you? Like your website, any social medias? Because I know you have workshops and all that different stuff where you're all about education, you're all about teaching people. So where can people come to learn more, potentially schedule a session, get in contact with you? Well, just plug yourself for a second.
Okay. So I have a website. It's www.mysoulhealer.com. And I'm on Facebook under Connecticut Center for Past Life Regression. I think on Instagram is Past Life Regression Connecticut, I think is what it is, Past Life Regression Connecticut. And I think those three places, primary, is that covering it? I think website's a big. Oh, anyway, I think you're on the website. The phone number's there, the email's there, the classes are there, the workshops get posted. I've got an online astrology class coming up starting January 17th. I do have ongoing workshops that get posted. Sessions, I will take somebody any day of the week. I only just do so many per week. So for people that only can do weekends, that's not a problem, or weekdays, it's not a problem. I start at either 11 a.m. or noon, and that's, and then we go for the whole day. It's the optimum time where people actually function. I know you start too late in the day and they're snoring by the time it's like, you're most of the way through. So,
yeah, perfect. Well, you know what? We'll grab all the links for Patty, and they'll be in the description. So if you feel drawn to contact her or go to her website, definitely go give her some love. Follow her on her social medias. Check out her site. And I'm going to put you on the spot, Patty, and say, do you have a message that you would like to leave for my audience? Like a parting wise words?
I think the parting wise words, if I'm thinking about being in a session with somebody, it's always about just surrender the fear. It's really, fear is the opposite of faith. Just knowing that you are being supported and guided, and trusting that you're being supported and guided, and just, that phrase, let go and let God, just see what would happen if you let go of the fear and go for it. You'd be surprised.
Well, that's a fantastic message, Patty. Thank you so much for coming on to my show and telling me about deep memory process and all the other stuff that we talked about. It was so fascinating to learn about.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited. It was exciting talking to you. You had great questions, so thanks, Ian.
That's it for today's episode. I would like to thank Patty for coming on and talking about deep memory process with me, and I would also like to thank you for tuning in. If you feel drawn to working with Patty, definitely reach out to her via her website, her links, and all that stuff. Definitely reach out to her. She knows exactly what she's talking about. Definitely don't forget to share the podcast with everybody that you know in the entire world, and don't forget to subscribe in your podcast player. Don't forget to reach out to Dr. Bruce Koloski for that 25% off of a board certification for clinical hypnotherapy or past life regression hypnotherapy. And if you want to come on to my show and talk with me, shoot me an email. My email is theregressionsession@gmail.com, and I would love to have you on the show.
I hated it that you broke me.